Hey everyone, in this video I'll show you how to make a global announcement system. As you can see here, there's a chat command and also a GUI. As always, you can get the model on my Patreon, otherwise let's head over to Roblox Studio. Before we begin, I'd like to thank this channel's very first sponsor, Devoted Fusion. As a scripter, I know how hard it can be to find the right artist for your game, and that's where Devoted Fusion comes in. They connect game developers with freelance artists, so it's perfect for game developers looking to hire and for artists looking for work. What makes them stand out is their vetting process. Every artist on the platform has been reviewed by a team of art directors to make sure there's no stolen work, and especially no AI. There's a really cool feature they have here. I have this image that I think looks nice and want to find an artist who can make something like it. Let's drop this image here, and we get a list of artists who can make something like this. Let's look for a style more common in Roblox games, and we can see lots of promising artists. Maybe we specifically want someone experienced with Roblox, so let's filter by Roblox Studio. You can select any art you like, and then let's add them to a shortlist. Now let's go to the shortlist page. You can see the rates each artist charges, their seniority, and their country in case time zones are an issue. We can decide which artist to work with from here, and if we're still uncertain, we can send a request to all the artists on the shortlist. First we need to specify the requirements, then we can hit send, and all the artists will be notified. Each artist will respond with a bid, and you can compare them to decide who you'll pick. Check them out at devotedfusion.com. Definitely give them a shot. What they're doing is awesome, and stuff like this is only going to become more valuable with more and more AI posers and art thieves popping up. Now let's get back to the video. I'll create a new place. In the server script service, create a script. First, let's get the players service. Since we don't just want any player to send a global message, let's make a list for all the user IDs we want to allow. We can get our own user ID from the player object. If there isn't a player object inside the players service, you need to first save the game to Roblox. Click Save. Once it's done loading, we should see a player object in the players service. Select the player object. The user ID will appear in the character appearance ID property. Let's copy and paste it into the list. We'll need a function to respond to whenever a player joins the game. It receives the player as a parameter. Look up the player's user ID in the list. If it's not inside the list, this player isn't allowed to send global messages, so let's return here. For now, let's just print the player's name to make sure it works. And let's have this function run whenever the player added event fires. In case a player has joined before this script runs, we should also iterate over any players and call the function manually. Let's run the game. In the output, you should see your username. Let's remove the user ID from the list and test again. This time, your username shouldn't be printed. Make sure you put the user ID back. Remove the print. The player object has a chatted event, which fires whenever the player sends a message in the chat. We receive the chat message as a parameter. Let's just print the message. Run the game. Whatever we type in the chat should show up in the output. We want to send global messages whenever we type a specific command before the message. One way we can do this is by splitting up the message into individual words. Let's make a variable for the command. We can use the string.split method to separate the chat message by spaces. What we get returned is a list, and the command will be the first in the list. We can also make it lowercase, so we don't need to worry about typing the command with the correct case. If the message doesn't have the command prefix, we can just return. For now, let's just print the args list. Let's run the game. If we don't add the command, our message won't show up in the output. Now let's type a message with the command at the start. The message shows up in the output. We also want to add the option to specify the message duration. The player can provide the duration right after the command. This is going to be an optional argument, so we need to check whether the player has given a duration or not. We can do this by checking if it's a number. The toNumber function will try to convert whatever we give it into a number. If it can't convert it into a number, the result will be nil. We can test this behavior in the command bar. Let's try to use toNumber on something that isn't a number. Nil is printed. Now try it with a string containing a number. The number is printed. We now need to reconstruct the message without the command. Because the duration might take up the second position, we need to check where the actual message will start in the list. If there is a duration, the message will start at the third position. If not, it will be at the second position. Now let's make a variable for the message. Iterate from the message start to the end of the list. Each time, we can append the word at that position to the variable. We also need to add a space each time. If we're at the last word, we don't want to add a space. Let's print the duration and the message. Now test the game. Let's first try without giving a duration. Since we didn't give a duration, nil is printed and the message follows. Now let's add a duration. This time the duration is printed. We made the duration argument optional, so we need to calculate the duration when it's not been provided. First, let's define a read speed variable so we can change the duration based on the length of the message. We should also define a minimum duration so shorter messages don't have too short of a duration. Now let's write the function to calculate the duration. It'll take the duration argument from the chat message and the message itself. Let's first try to convert the duration into a number. If the player didn't provide a duration, let's calculate it based on the length of the message. Then make sure it's never smaller than the minimum duration. Finally, return it. Now we can use this function to get the duration. Let's print it. Now we can test the game. If we write a shorter message, the minimum duration should be printed. Now try a longer message. This time we get a longer duration. Let's also make sure specifying a duration works. The duration we provided should be printed. Now we can move on to sending the message to all servers. We'll be using the messaging service, which allows scripts to communicate between servers. Let's make a function to send the message. It will receive the player sending the message itself, and the duration. We'll use the publish async function of the messaging service. The messaging service works by creating channels of communication, which we can access by a unique topic. We need to give the topic to the publish async function, so let's make a variable for the topic. Notice how this function only has a single message argument. This means we need to pack the message and duration into a single list. Let's call the function at the end. Now we need to respond to the topic. We do this with the subscribe async function. Give the topic, then a function that will be called whenever a message is received. Let's just print the message. Now run the game. If you want to test this with 2 players, you won't be able to have one player on Roblox Studio and another in a live server because messages from Roblox Studio aren't sent to live servers. You'll have to join live servers for both accounts, so you might need 2 different devices. Let's send a message and see what we get in the output. What we get is a table with 2 fields. The information we sent is under the data field. The sent field tells us the time in seconds when the message was sent out. We're only interested in the data field. Let's retrieve the announcement message and the duration. Let's print them. Now if we send a message, we should see the announcement and duration. Let's also try giving a duration in the message. You should now see the specific duration you provided. Now we need to send this message to each player. In the replicated storage, create a folder. I'll name it remotes. This is where we'll store the remote events. Now create a remote event. I'll name it display global announcement. The server will use this to tell each client to display the global announcement. First, let's get the remote event. Now all we have to do is call fire all clients, which will send the message to every player in the server. We need to send the announcement and the duration. Now we need to handle the client side. In the starter GUI, create a screen GUI. Inside, create a frame. Let's name it container. I'm going to make its size the size I want for the messages. Make the frame invisible. Inside the frame, let's make the frame for the message. Because we made the container frame size the size we want for each message, we can simply set the size to 1 on the scale. Inside the container frame, create a UI list layout. Let's add some padding so each message frame isn't touching. Now let's duplicate the message frame a bunch. The frames appear in the wrong direction. We want the frames to go up when the new frame is added. We need to set the vertical alignment property to bottom. This means newer items are at the top and older items move to the top. Delete the duplicates. Inside the message frame, create one more frame. Again, set its size to 1 on the scale. Let's make the message frame invisible. I'll go with black for this frame. We want to fade out the edges, which we can do with a UI gradient. Click the three dots on the transparency property. Let's first make both ends have a transparency of 1. Then click anywhere on the line to add a new point. Set the point's position to somewhere on the left half. I'll go with 0.2. Then set its value to something smaller than 1. We want to repeat this for the right half. Since we used a position of 0.2 before, we want to choose 0.8 for symmetry, and we'll also use the same value. I'm going to name this frame background. The reason we need the second frame inside the message frame is because we want to animate the frame's position when it appears and disappears. Because of the UI list layout, the message frame's position is locked. We can move the background frame however we want without being affected by the UI list layout. Inside the background frame, create a text label. Let's make its background invisible. I'll make its text color white. And for the font, I'll go with Comic Sans. Let's type in a message to see how it'll look. Right now, the top and bottom of the text are too close to the edges of the frame. We can fix this by adding UI padding to the text label. We're only interested in the height of the text, so change the padding bottom and padding top properties. Finally, let's add a UI stroke to give the text an outline. In the replicated storage, create a folder named Templates. Let's make a folder for the message template. Then drop the message frame inside. Inside the screen GUI, create a local script. Start by getting the remote event. Then get the template. Now we need the container frame where we'll be putting the messages in. Let's make a function to create a message frame with a message and a duration. Create a copy of the template. Set the text label's text to the message. Parent it to the container frame. Finally, wait for the duration before deleting the message frame. Let's have this function run whenever we receive a message from the remote event. Run the game. Let's send out a global message. You should see the message frame appear displaying the announcement. And the newer announcements appear below the older ones. We also want to add the player's name to the start of the message, similar to the Roblox chat. Let's bring the message frame back into the starter GUI. We need to enable the rich text property, which allows us to format different parts of the text in different ways. In our case, we want to change the color of the player's name in the message. Let's copy the placeholder text. I'll open up a script so it's easier to see what I'm typing. Rich text allows us to add tags that will change the text formatting. There's a bunch of tags we can use similar to HTML. For changing the color, we have the font tag. Tags are contained in angle brackets. We also need to close a tag so the text label knows where the formatting ends. This means only the word Roblox will be formatted by this tag. Right after the font, we can add a color attribute. For color, we need to give a string. We can either use the hex code or RGB. I'll go with RGB. With this, the word Roblox will be colored red. Now we can paste this into the text label's text. Return the frame to the templates folder. Open the server script. First, let's choose the color we want. Use color3.fromRGB to pick a color. Then take the numbers and put them in a list. This is because the color3 object divides these numbers by 255, so we would need to multiply them again and then round them to make sure there's no decimals. We can also add the verified icon next to the player's name. First, make a variable for the verified icon. We can get a string that we can concatenate to the announcement message with the UTF-8 code. Now let's make a function that takes the original message and will return a formatted one. It needs the player sending the message and the message itself. First, let's get the player's name. I'm going to use the display name. You can use the username if you want. Let's now build the formatted string. Start with the opening font tag. Since I've used quotation marks for the string, I'll need to use single apostrophes for the RGB part. Add each of the RGB values separated by commas. Now we can add the player's name and the closing font tag. Next is the verified icon. And finally, the announcement message. Now we can return the string. In send announcement, let's call the function. Let's run the game. Now when we send a message, the text is formatted with color and the verified icon. Next, let's animate the message frame. We'll need the tween service. Let's make tween infos for when the message appears and when it disappears. I'm going to use the same tween infos for both. Now make a function we'll call when a message is being created. It'll take the copy of the template. For this animation, I want a simple fade-in. First, make sure the transparencies are all at 1. We need to do this for the background frame, the text labels text, and the UI stroke. Now let's do the tweens. All we need to do is set the transparency back to 0 for each of the above. Call the function before parenting the frame to the container. Let's run the game. And now each message fades in. Next, we need to handle the message disappearing. Let's just copy the message appear function. Remove the lines setting the transparency. Then we want to set the transparencies to 1 for each tween. I also want to animate the position so the message slides off the screen. We want to delete the message only after the tweens have ended. Let's make a variable for one of the tweens. Then play that tween. We can then wait for the tween's completed event. And finally delete the frame. Now replace the destroy function with the message disappear function. Run the game. Now the message slides off the screen before disappearing. Let's also add a sound to play whenever a message appears. Put the sound into the local script and name it sound. Open the local script. In the message appear function, play the sound. Let's test the game. When we send a message, the sound is played. We'll now make the GUI for sending announcements. In the starter GUI, make another screen GUI. Create a frame inside named container. Let's position it in the center. We can do this by setting the anchor point to 0.5, then the position to 0.5 on the scale. Inside, create a text button. Name it Close Button. Make another button, put it directly under the screen GUI, name it Open Button. In the frame, create a text box. Name it Message Box. This is where we'll type the announcement. Let's give it a different color from the background. We can add some placeholder text. Right now the text is too large. We want to keep the text scaled functionality, so create a UI text size constraint inside the text box. This allows us to set a maximum text size. Duplicate the text box and name it Duration Box. Let's change the placeholder text. In the frame, create another text button. Name it Send Button. Let's also add some UI padding to the text boxes since the text is too close to the edge on the left. We should also do the same for the right side. I'll copy it into the duration box. Drag the GUI into the script. This is because we don't want everyone to see the GUI. In the server script, first get the GUI. In the player added function, we'll need the player GUI. Create a copy of the GUI and parent it to the player GUI. The player GUI removes all of its contents when the player's character spawns in, so we also need to handle that. We'll do the same thing here. If we play the game, we should have the GUI. Let's also make sure it works after respawning. In the GUI, create a local script. Start by getting the GUI's components. For now, we just need the open button, the container, and the close button. For the container, let's set visible to false, as we don't want the GUI to be open at the start. Use the mouse button one click event for the open button. For this button, when the user clicks, the GUI should open if it's closed, or close if it's already opened. To do this, we just need to flip the visible property. For the close button, we just need to close the GUI, so set visible to false. Let's run the game. Clicking the buttons works as expected. Now get the rest of the GUI's components. We'll need another remote event. This one will be for a client to tell the server to send a global message. Now let's get the remote event. When the send button is clicked, we can send a message to the server. In it, we need to give the text in the message text box and in the duration text box. Now open up the server script, get the remote event, listen to on-server event. We'll receive the player trying to send the message, the announcement message itself, and the duration. Exploiters are able to run code as they like on the client, including firing remote events. This means we have to make sure the player is allowed to send global messages. We'll do the same as we did in the player added function. Then call getDuration in case the player didn't provide a duration. Finally, call sendAnnouncement. Now let's test the game. We can now send messages through a GUI. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you're interested in the model file or the upgraded model, they'll be on my Patreon. You'll also get access to an exclusive channel in the Discord server to send your video ideas. I'll be reading over these first. Becoming a member also helps me continue making these videos. And if Patreon isn't your thing, subscribing and liking the video also helps a ton. As always, thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.